So we're talking today about the Palo Alto Animal Shelter, whose future has been up in the air for several years. And joining us is Al Mollica, Executive Director of Pets in Need. Welcome, Al.
Thank you.
And your organization is taking over operations of the animal shelter. We're in that transition period right now, so we're here to find out what's going on, a little bit about Pets in Need and your 50-plus year history, and what Palo Altans and environs can expect.
Good. Great.
So,
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so this partnership, very new, both for Pets in Need and for the city, hasn't done it before.
Right.
What is happening exactly?
Well, we just signed the contract with the city at the end of December. And we are working with city staff members now and the staff at Palo Alto Animal Shelter to figure out the best way to transition from current structure to Pets in Need operating the facility.
Okay. And what was it that prompted this whole partnership to be formed? I know there was an audit like 3 years ago.
Yeah, in 2015 there was an audit, but even before that, I think the biggest factor was Mountain View's decision back in 2011 to withdraw from its partnership, which cost the city about $400,000 in annual fees that it was collecting before then. So it was really a financial issue, and I don't think the animal shelter is ever meant to be like a profit-making place, but there was a sense on from the council, especially in the aftermath of the Great Recession, that the costs are now so high that it's not really financially sustainable. There was actually some talk of closing the shelter entirely and outsourcing the operation. And the audit that you mentioned just kind of added a little fuel to the fire. It basically concluded that the facility is obsolete. It's hard for it to compete with other area shelters as far as attracting new partners. You know, it's too small, too cramped. You had like little vignettes about animals being in staff lunchrooms because there wasn't room in kennels. So there was a sense that something has to change, and so there was an RFP which Al's organization signed up for, and now we're here.
And Al, you were already heading the organization at that time that you decided. How was that decision made? I mean, that's a big stretch.
Big decision.
Yeah.
Lots of discussions on the part of the staff and the board about how to proceed. Pets in Need is, an organization has been around for 54 years, and we've been a leader in the Northern California area for all that time as a no-kill animal facility. One of the areas that we were struggling with, though, was how do we expand our footprint? How do we make an even greater impact on animal homelessness and so on? And we were limited in how far we could go with our existing facility, and the opportunity came up with Palo Alto, and we had lots of discussions within the board and the staff, and decided this is a great way for us to try to take our impact to another level. So,
now I understand that you've had a shelter for 25 of those years and even renovated your shelter and reopened in 2010. So you've already got sort of new things bubbling up.
Right.
And so then this represents an expansion of services and staffing, I imagine.
Yeah, even beyond that. When I came on board, and this is not me patting myself on the back, but when I came on board, we were adopting out about 400 animals per year. This year, things go well. Our fiscal year runs May 1 to April 30. So we have another few months to go. But if things go well over the next couple of months, we will surpass the 1,000 adoption number.
Wow.
That's how we're at about a point, once we reached about 800 adoptions, where we realized our shelter was sort of right at the edge of being beyond capacity. So we needed some kind of a overflow facility to allow us to expand, beyond where we are right now. And so the Palo Alto facility is inadequate and deficient as it is. Functionally, it still represents our best opportunity to expand.
And you mentioned a few minutes ago that guys are a no-kill shelter. Can you explain a little bit what that means and how that's different from Palo Alto's traditional animal shelter operation, if it is different?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some confusion about what this term really means.
Well, I can talk about Pets in Need. What it means to us is once we make a decision to rescue an animal, and that process involves us going to municipal shelters in the Northern California area, and that actually as far down as Central Valley. and we pull as many animals as we can possibly pull from those shelters. Once we do that, once we make the commitment and we've made that rescue, the animal's our responsibility until we find them a loving home. And in some cases, you know, it turns out they end up having serious medical conditions or behavior problems. That's not a deterrent for us. That doesn't mean anything. If we have to keep an animal for a year or so and deal with medical issues, we'll do that. And in some cases, you know, we've invested thousands of dollars to get medical or behavior conditions addressed before we feel comfortable adopting that animal. So that's what no-kill means to us. It's a full 100% commitment to the animal once it's been adopted.
But I was just going to ask, there are some circumstances, though, in which case, like for medical issues or like if they're so severe that the animal is suffering, are there any circumstances in which you would have to make a decision of euthanasia?
Yeah, euthanasia means to end suffering. So if it's a situation where you know, the animal's in the judgment of our medical staff, we always involve the medical staff and behavior staff. If in their judgment the animal is at a point where it is not redeemable and is at a point where it is suffering, then we will euthanize. But to put that in perspective, in the 4+ years, 4.5 years or so I've been at Pets in Need, we've euthanized probably less than 25 animals that we brought into the shelter. So we make a real concerted effort to try to keep them, put them in loving homes.
Are there any animals that have been with you and will be with you for the remainder of their lives then?
Hopefully not. You know, we'll take care of any medical or behavior issue, and if necessary, we will transfer the animal to a rescue group, or if there are sanctuary opportunities, we'll have as wonderful as our shelter is, we recognize that it's still not a place for an animal to live, you know, their whole lives.
Sure, yeah.
So we make it as comfortable as possible for as long as it takes, and then, you know, we're constantly seeking that sort of loving home kind of an environment for our animals.
Mm-hmm. So for people who are familiar with the kind of range of services provided by Palo Alto Animal Services, what is Pets in Need doing, and what is the city still going to retain control over?
Well, the city will maintain control over the animal control aspect. Mm-hmm. So there are 4 animal control officers that will continue to be city employees.
So they're going out into the community to address problem animals.
And they will be, you know, public face for the shelter and for the organization. Okay. So they'll be basically continuing business as usual. And then the other folks that will be operating the shelter inside the shelter will be Pets in Need employees. Mm-hmm. And that includes the current veterinarian, Dr. Yaffe, and the registered vet tech, and another staff person who's been there for a long time. I felt like that was important to maintain continuity and to make sure, you know, we had that knowledge of how the shelter operates from the Palo Alto staff. So it'll be those 3 folks that will be coming over, transitioning over from Palo Alto, and then we'll be adding another 6 or 7 of our own staff people.
So we are now in a time of transition because, as you mentioned, I think the council approved the contract or voted to approve it like in late November, and the Pets in Need board in December. Mm-hmm. And so you guys are just starting to kind of roll out your services to the local shelter. Can you talk a little bit about what residents could expect in the next few months as you guys set up your operation, and how you plan to kind of roll out your services? Right.
Well, we hope to take over in February, full-fledged takeover in February, and the plan is for us to immediately try to replicate in Palo Alto what we have in Redwood City. So that's you know, pretty aggressive marketing programs for the animals that we bring into the shelter, pretty diverse and broad-based education programs that will allow residents of Los Altos is in Palo Alto, to have their kids learn about pet ownership at the shelter. We will reach out to corporations, and I was mentioning right before we went on the air, we have what we call a Yappy Hour program, where we take some of our animals into corporations and let them sort of interact with employees for a while. All those programs that we run pretty effectively at Redwood City, we'd like to replicate over in Palo Alto as soon as possible.
And so are these educational offerings going to be like at the facility, or is this more like, if you're thinking like online kind of Facebook and that kind of stuff. Are you actually going to have like kind of new educational facilities within the Palo Alto shelter?
Well, I mean, you know how inadequate the shelter is. Space
Yeah.
is a huge
Yeah,
issue.
that's why I ask. I mean, it sounds like an ambitious given what you're working with, but
Right. Well, we hope to use as much of the facility as we possibly can for the education programs. The happy hours that I mentioned, there are a lot of things that we can do off-site. We go into schools and talk to kids and bring animals into schools. So to the extent that we can, you do outside work, and we may need to do that even more because our facility in Redwood City is 10,000 square feet, and the Palo Alto facility is about 5,000. And our facility feels crammed when you end up with 15 or 20 kids in there for like a summer camp program. That'll be even worse in Palo Alto. So those are the kinds of things I think we're going to have to figure out. Can we really run a summer camp program in Palo Alto in a shelter that small? Maybe. Maybe if we use the outdoor, the Baylands areas for some of the educational programs. So a lot of those things will sort of unfold for us, I think, over the next several months.
Now, the deal is inked now, but it did take a while for both Pets in Need and the city to kind of come to terms. Was it more than a year and a half or so? Can you tell us a little bit about some of the discussions that were happening? Were they around the quality of the facility, or who's paying for upgrades, or the long-term plan?
Yeah.
What was going on?
All those things. Primarily the facility. One of the issues and concerns that we had from the beginning and still have is, you talk about the facility being inadequate. One of the areas that it's inadequate is in terms of the capacity for cats and dogs. And when you have a no-kill philosophy, capacity is an issue. You don't ever want to get, what usually happens in a lot of municipal shelters is they have a small shelter and intake exceeds outflow. And then you have people that have to make very difficult decisions. We don't want to be in that position. So we've been working with the city for a while to create an environment in the shelter that will involve adding some capacity for dogs and cats and expanding the medical area. So those are, and the city and the council has approved the $3.4 million renovation capital project improvement. So those are the main things we've been working on. How can you work together to turn the facility into something that at least is a little more manageable and workable for us?
I just wanted to ask about what you just mentioned, because the council did approve these improvements, which includes a new classroom, medical suites, 16 kennels. What is the plan and kind of the timeline for making these capital improvements? And is this something that's going to happen in the first few months, or and can you run your operations effectively concurrently with the construction work?
Yes, I think we can, and they've actually started, Gennady. They've started the improving or renovating or upgrading, repairing the existing kennels. We have a meeting next week to talk about what the next phase is, which is to address the small medical area and to get that area expanded. We're talking about bringing in a modular unit for staff people, and for eventually that's where we'll run our education programs. And then plan on like where would the location be for these new kennels that we want to bring in. So all that stuff will happen over the next, 9 months to a year or so, but the plan would be for us to continue to operate. Now, it may reach a point with the expansion of the medical area where we may need to bring our mobile surgical van over and operate out of the mobile surgical van for some number of weeks, but we're prepared to do that.
Given that one of the prompts for this partnership was the loss of revenue, is this a money-saving deal for the city? Is there going to be some cost savings on the part of the city when you come in?
I think, I don't have the exact number, I'm going to look it up in a second, but I think that was one of the big kind of reasons that the city council approved the deal so enthusiastically, including the $3.4 million expenditures, is the idea that the revenues have plummeted so badly. The number of positions has been reduced from about 13 to about 10. Just in those years. So there is a sense that it will save money after the initial investment. Don't have the exact dollar amount, but
sure. And you're able to save money because of the fundraising effort that Pets in Need does?
It's not really saving money. We estimate that the first year, year one, we're putting together a budget. Looks like it's going to be around 1.5 million. So about $650,000 of that will come in from the management fee from the city. So the organization will be responsible for generating another, $800,000 or so. We will be able to hopefully do that through fundraising, which is something that an area of revenue source that the city would never be able to access. So that's our plan. Our plan is to immediately begin reaching out to the members of the communities that we're going to be serving and letting them know that the revenue that we get in from the city is only going to represent about 40% of the dollars we're going to need to, and that's at year one. The plan would be, of course, for us to expand the number of animals we're taking in and the programs. So we're starting with a year one budget of about 1.5, and it's going to go up from there. Whereas the city's management fee is, that's only going to increase about 3% each year. So keeping the shelter vibrant and financially sound is going to depend on how successful we are with our fundraising effort.
Now, you're no stranger to nonprofits or to fundraising. Tell us a little bit about your history.
Wow, it's like ancient history. I've been in the nonprofit sector since the late 1970s, and I've worked in higher education, I've worked in health services, I've been in the nonprofit sector for my entire life, and I've done primarily in fundraising positions. I've been vice president for institutional advancement for a couple of colleges and universities, and I've done 5 capital campaigns. So that's sort of my niche or wheelhouse, and hopefully I'll be able to bring that experience to bear for Pets in Need over the next few years.
Yeah, you sound fairly well suited for this task.
Yeah. And I just wanted to kind of go back to, we mentioned in the past there's going to be an aggressive push to kind of fundraise and maybe even get some volunteers. I know that the Redwood City facility has a pretty robust volunteer program.
Right.
And I know that when I was talking in Palo Alto in 2011, 2012 about possibly shuttering the shelter, there were new groups forming, lots of people got energized to save the shelter. And it's kind of hard to sustain interest for 6 or 7 years as these negotiations dragged on. But I kind of wanted to get your thoughts about the role of the people who kind of stepped up and who want to volunteer. How can they be effective? And also, like, what is the Pets in Need planning to do to kind of attract more volunteers to help you with your Palo Alto effort?
Yeah, and in any animal shelter, the volunteers are the core. Most shelters have a very small skeleton staff, and they're busy, taking care of the animals, providing the medical services that they need. And if it weren't for the volunteers, and this is absolutely the case at Redwood City, if it weren't for the volunteers, the level of care that the animals are getting, the attention that they're getting, wouldn't be nearly as great as it is right now for us. So we have about just under 100 active volunteers in Redwood City, and they do everything from assist with medical services to help out with off-site events to helping with our education programs, walking dogs.
That's an enormous staff.
Socializing, yeah. So, ideally, I don't know, we'll get to 100 in Palo Alto, but that would be the plan to, rebuild the volunteer network there so they can provide those vital services to us.
So if somebody in Palo Alto wants to get involved, what would you suggest they do?
Contact Pets in Need at our Redwood City facility, and we'll immediately put them in the pipeline and begin that process of getting them knowledgeable about how we operate at Pets in Need Redwood City, and they can help us with the transition to moving over to Palo Alto. It'd be great.
One final question here. I want to ask, are there other nonprofits who are doing what you're doing with a city, or is this partnership sort of novel in the nation? Is this something that you're hoping to make an example for other cities and animal services?
This is becoming more and more common around the country, where a city will subcontract with a nonprofit organization like Pets in Need to operate their facility, which I think is a smart thing to do because obviously we know more about managing an animal shelter than city officials do. So I think my goal is to operate the facility in such a way that the city will be proud and satisfied, the residents will be proud, and Pets in Need will feel like we've sort of improved or expanded the mission of the organization that we've supported, and that's been at the heart of the organization for the past 54 years. Mm-hmm. And that I think that's doable, and in the end result is lots more animals are saved and people are satisfied, and our organization is having a greater impact.
Well, we wish you the best of luck, and we'll
you.
be watching.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Mollica, thank you again for being here, Executive Director, Pets in Need.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
That wraps up this edition of Behind the Headlines. If you want to follow this topic or any Palo Alto news, go to paloaltoonline.com. If you want to talk about Pets in Need, go to Town Square, paloaltoonline.com/square. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next week.